How's everybody doing today? All right, come on. I'm from the South and I go to church, so let's try that again. I don't want to. How's everybody doing today? That's great, great. Well, thank you all for coming here. My name is Clay Johnson. I work for the Sunlight Foundation. My title is Director of Sunlight Labs. What Sunlight Labs is an open source technology and development group that helps make government more open. You guys have heard a lot, I think, over the past 3 days or 4 days or however long you've been here about open government. It's becoming a reality and people are really interested in it. And I want to talk to you a little bit about three things, really. What the landscape is and the problems. That'll be a brief rehash of, I think, a lot of stuff you've heard if you were here for Andrew's talk and Ellen, my boss's conversation earlier. But then we're going to focus on the meat, which is what is it that we can do as a web community to actually help make government more open, transparent, and accountable. So on the landscape side, things are pretty exciting. This guy is the President of the United States. His name is Barack Obama. How many people here have heard of him? All right. And he says, transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency. And I think he means it. The people that he's hired, the people that he has around him, many people are fanatics of open government and transparency and ethics. But this guy, too, this is Harry Reid. He's the Senate Majority Leader. He says it's time for open government, transparency, and a time for results. I like that. That's something I like to hear from the Senate Majority Leader. That's really cool. This is the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. She says the internet is an incredible vehicle for transparency, honest leadership, and open government. I couldn't find a more flattering picture of her, so if there's any staff in here, I'm sorry. But she's the Speaker of the House, so the three highest-ranking elected officials in the country are now talking about open government. But just in case you were wondering if I was a little partisan, even this guy says ethics and transparency are not election year buzzwords. They are obligations of democracy and the duties of honorable public service. That's true. What he said was true. This is incredible. This is amazing that we've got both parties saying transparency and open government is awesome. And I want to talk for a second about why that is. On the Democratic side, transparency and open government helps them keep the majority. It helps them stay in power. On the Republican side, it helps them take back the majority. Ethics and accountability are usually what creates party shifts in the House and eventually the presidency. We saw that in 2006 with things like Mark Foley and all the other nonsense that happened back then. This was a huge shift in the electorate, and it was because of ethics and transparency and accountability that these things happened. So what I have to say about all of this is it's a great time to be in Washington, D.C. So hooray! That's the landscape, right? It's a great time to be in the sort of focused around the transparency issue and about what's going on in ethics and government. Here's why transparency is important. I want to give you three reasons. One is that transparency makes a healthier democracy. It makes government healthier. It makes us as a country better. I think we can all sort of agree on that. It's kind of obvious, but sometimes it's not so obvious, especially when it comes to things like the digital immersion in our Congress. This is a neat graph. This is at webahead.com. I don't actually know the name of the person who did it. It was a volunteer for us. And what he did was he applied a number of points to legislators based on their digital immersion. So he said, if you got a Twitter account, I'll give you 2 points for that. If you got a YouTube account, I'll give you 3 points for that. If you have a blog on your website, I'll give you 3 points for that. He came up with some form of calculus to calculate the digital immersion. And as you can see, most of Congress is not very digitally immersed, right? There's not much on the x-axis here where it says high. But what's really interesting is the next slide here. The y-axis is the total dollar amount of earmarks that have been requested by a member of Congress, and the x-axis is the level of digital immersion. As you can see, as members of Congress become more digitally immersed, they ask for less money in earmarks. This is really kind of cool. This is one correlation that, again, this person, Wubbahead, came up with. God, I love the internet. I get to go on stage and say Wubbahead. Came up with that I think is really, really kind of interesting. And I wonder what else is out there in terms of this kind of study that shows that maybe a digitally immersed member of Congress is also a more ethical member of Congress. It makes sense. The more transparent you are, the more on the internet you are, the more transparent you sort of have to be, and then the more ethical you're going to be, and the more resistant you're going to be to do shady things. This is Recovery.gov. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Recovery.gov. It's in its infancy right now. They haven't done a lot of stuff on it. It's powered by Drupal, an open source content management system I'm sure some people in here care for. And its eventual goal is to track how all of this money that's flowing out of the federal government is being spent. It's, I think, a demonstration of the Obama administration's commitment to transparency. Again, it's in its infancy right now, but they're setting up a lot of infrastructure around this kind of spending, specifically about how agencies and sub-agencies and states that are receiving this money report back. One of the things in the OMB memo that went out about this stuff says that all these agencies actually have to report all of this data flowing back out about how this money is being spent in common feed formats like Atom and RSS. So the government's starting to get it a little bit, which is kind of exciting. But also it helps democracy. Look at this. This is a site that we do called Open Congress. And this is a bill that comes out of the 111th Congress, this Congress. It's got 228 comments on it. Some bills in Open Congress have over 30,000 comments on them. The Unemployment Extension Act of 2008 actually has 20 to 30,000 comments on it. And people are finding them and using it as a way to debate pieces of legislation and really talk about them. The next step is how do we get Congress to listen to that debate? And part of that is our fault, right? We don't know quite how to present 40,000 comments to someone in a reasonable way, and part of it is actually luring them on to sites like this so that they can actually participate with us. The second thing is, and people don't often think about this, but transparency opens up markets for people. Government's opening of data creates commercial opportunities. I'll give you an example of that. This is a website called stormchaser.com, and I'm going to New Orleans tomorrow for a week to spend a week cleaning up houses and get away from computers, and I cannot wait. But this is Hurricane Katrina's flight path, and all this comes from a compilation of public and private data coming out of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and other government agencies. Weather.com is powered by a lot of government data. Traffic stuff comes from government data. Here's Google Maps. Google Maps probably could not exist without some form of government data coming out of it, especially census, boundary information, stuff like that. So open data coming out of the government is able to create for us really interesting ways to present markets, to present commercial aspects to consumers. This is a fairly new website. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of it. It's called EveryBlock. This is my neighborhood in Washington, D.C. I'm able to chart crimes over time and by neighborhood and by quadrant in Washington, D.C. And these sites are starting to pop up a lot more. People are starting to take data coming out of government and make commercial, or even EveryBlock, I think, is going to be an open source nonprofit. They're being creative with this data and creating a lot of different ways for people to interact with it, some of which may very well be commercial. And this is one of the things that's emerging up. The third thing is transparency saves lives. And this is how many people here have eaten a pistachio nut in the past couple of days? Right, because the ones that did are dead. So this is I wish I had the time to update this slide. This is the salmonella recall. And the FDA actually did something interesting here. They made the salmonella peanut recall widget so people could put it on their own sites and stuff like that to liberate this data and put it out here. But the next slide, the next slide is the best slide in the whole presentation. So if you want to get up and leave, you're about to see the best one. This is awesome. This is a company called Dysfunctional Clothing. got its hoodies recalled due to strangulation hazards. Don't buy your children dysfunctional clothing. And this is yet another example of government being open and sharing information with people that could save lives. But this is the problem that we're facing. While all of these members of Congress are kowtowing to transparency, and America is saying, the American citizenry is saying, we want government to be more accountable. Who here doesn't want government to be more accountable and transparent? Except for you, Congressman Jefferson. Thank you. Everybody wants government to be more accountable and transparent, including Barack Obama, Nancy Pelosi, John McCain, and Harry Reid. They all want government to be more transparent. The problem is that between us and them, and this is really how you have to think about this problem, between us and them, there's this giant machine with 1,300 agencies and 3 million employees called the federal government. And we have to change it. We have to meet our members of Congress, our president, halfway. We have to work on the outside as well as the inside if we want to change this stuff. This is my favorite slide in the whole world, too. It is, you remember that last scene of Indiana Jones? This is that, right, where they take the Ark of the Covenant and put it in the Smithsonian, right, the Smithsonian warehouse, where it's nowhere to be found. And this is where a lot of our government data lives. So we say things at the Sunlight Foundation like public means online. It's not acceptable for the government to say, we're going to make documents public by putting them in this warehouse that has an open access in Washington, D.C. No, we say, if you want something to be public, then it must be put online. And that's our major tenet, and that's what we're trying to do at the Sunlight Foundation. We're trying to cause the death of these giant government warehouses. This is, from a technical perspective, this is a quote from FEC.gov. This is great. The amount field is in COBOL format and may contain a special character, see table below, if the amount is negative. To convert these to standard negative integers, you will need to replace the rightmost character with its associated integer and then multiple the number by -1. For example, if the amount is it 20 bracket, replace the bracket with the 0 to get 200, then multiply by -1, and the correct amount is -200. That's from the FEC. This is the data version of the giant warehouse, right? It's virtually unusable data that we have to go in as developers, as citizens, and find ways to clean up, either by encouraging the FEC to change, which, by the way, they are very much encouraged to change. I'll talk a little bit about that later. And by actually developing software that gets the job done before they get it done, because we can't afford to wait on government. Sunlight Labs, we open government. We're a community now. We open government by using Python, Ruby, PHP. We're playing a little bit with Hadoop to sort of clean up these large data volumes. And we are the staff of the Sunlight Foundation. We all live in Washington, D.C. or the surrounding area. And we are obsessed with how we can do this stuff. We're a community of 466 open source developers as well so far, and we have a cute robot as a mascot. I'm kind of a fan of this robot because he's a little ambiguous about this change thing. He's like, yeah, I think I'm into it, but I'm not quite sold yet. And I think that's sort of how Congress is too. They're like, yeah, I think we could probably get around this, but and we need your help, and that's why I'm here. And this is what we're going to talk about for the rest of the time. I need your help to change government, and I'm going to talk about how you can help us. There are lots of different ways to do it. But the most important thing to realize is that software is faster than consensus. We can get government to change by writing code, by developing websites, and making government more transparent far faster than we can get members of Congress to agree on how to do it. So let's do it for them. And that's what the point of Sunlight Labs is. Let's do it for them, because we are citizens of this country, and it is time for developers, technical people, social media experts, we even value you, to transform this country. But we don't have much time. This is my theory. Some people disagree with me, but Every politician is kowtowing towards transparency right now. They love talking about transparency. And the Obama administration is building up a team inside that is really gung-ho on transparency. But I think that's going to change. I think in January of next year, once people start running for election again, that's going to change. It's going to get a lot more political. So my theory is that we really have only about 9 months. I know that's scary. We only have about 9 months to really grab as much turf and push the ball as far forward as we can until we're dragged into the cycle of election and terrible television advertisements again and again and again. And so we have this window of opportunity, and that's why I'm saying it's fine to talk about this open government stuff, but let's do something about it. Let's move forward. Let's push the ball forward, because we need to attack these walls between us and our government, these technical multiplying by negative bracket walls, as quickly and as soon as we can. We need to transform transparency, in other words, from an issue into a movement. And the first thing I would need to ask of you is to be an organizer. And I know that that's sort of terrifying, being an organizer, but Barack Obama was a community organizer, and he's the President of the United States, so this could be your start. What does it mean to be an organizer? Well, there's this guy, Grover Norquist. He's a Republican, and he was one of the grandfathers. He and Karl Rove and this guy, Ralph Reed, sort of started the modern-day conservative movement in the back of a bar called Bull Feathers in Washington, D.C., after Ralph Reed found Jesus. And the conservatives at the time were lost. They didn't know where they were going. They didn't have any form of leadership. And Grover said something really simple and really remarkable that I think actually sparked the sort of modern-day conservative movement that ended up with George W. Bush as president. And he said, "I don't know what to do, but I know that people need to know each other's names." And so he started making sure that people knew each other's names. He started convening people and started just saying, okay, if we're going to have a movement, we got to know who each other are. So this is the interactive part of today's presentation. I want you to find right now somebody sitting next to you and tell them what your name is and remember it. I know that's going to be hard. All right, pay attention. Right? So the reason why this is important is because we can't work together, we can't coordinate, we can't do anything if we're acting as strangers. We have to work together in order to tear these boundaries down, and we have to do it in a way where we're organized. We don't all have to agree. Let's put that out there. We don't all have to agree, but we all have to know who each other are, and we all have to know what each other are doing. We don't have to agree with it, we just have to know that it's there. The second thing is, once you make sure that people know each other's names, you move them into the physical space. My job's done here, we're already here. But you as an organizer, a local organizer, you're going to find that most of the people that you're able to attract come off of the internet. So you get them from mailing lists, you get them from hosting meetups. You create a honeypot for people to find you. And then what you want to do is move them into the physical space. I'll give you an example. In Washington, D.C., we decided that there was a lot of interest around this transparency stuff, especially in the D.C. community. So we said, hey, there are these unconferences called bar camps that are happening. Why don't we have a transparency camp here in Washington, D.C.? And so we did. And it was this amazing moment. It was magical. People from the government showed up, developers showed up, policy experts showed up, and they all got in a room and they were saying, how do we solve these problems? How do we conquer these problems? What do we do? And then it was a 2-day event, and at the end of it, people said, we need more of this. We can't just let this die here at Transparency Camp. So now we have transparency breakfasts, right? And we meet the first Wednesday of every month in Washington, D.C. to really conspire between people from the Department of Defense, government contractors, independent developers, people at the Sunlight Foundation, to conspire on how to work from the inside and the outside on how to change our government and make it more open and accountable, right? That's the power of getting people to know each other's names and moving them into the physical space, because then they begin to create relationships with one another, and then it becomes all the more powerful when they're communicating online. But I can't stress enough how much this matters. If you look at the Dean campaign, Howard Dean, right, it was all about meetup.com, and the Barack Obama thing was all about, like, get people to meet in local venues and stuff like that. And that's the same thing that we've got to do in the transparency movement. And look, developers, I'm talking to you specifically. You've got to get your friends together and meet in the physical space to write code to open up our government. And the third thing you have to do is make specific requests to people as an organizer and check your ego at the door. You know, as we're starting this transparency movement, I kind of want to make a request. Let's make this an asshole-free movement. Think about it. Like, if all of us said, okay, if everybody left this room today and was like, yeah, I'm a transparency advocate, and we're not going to have any assholes, we'd be the most effective movement in the history of mankind. Think about it. So what does that really mean? I mean, it's kind of funny, but it means you're here to serve a mission. You're here to make government more open. You're not here to show other people that you're very smart or very powerful. You're here to make it so that the doors of government open and people can participate in their government. So, by specific requests, I'm going to talk about some specific requests that I would like to see happen, and in a second, and this one, become an organizer, is one of them. But it's about saying, here's something for you to do, because when people show up and ask to help, don't show leadership, right? Don't just say, well, do whatever you want to do, because that's not leadership. Do them the service. Serve them by providing them with a means to express themselves. So one thing that I'd like to see happen is more hackathons. One thing that we're doing here, we've been really successful. We did it here and at PyCon, the Python convention, is convene these hackathons. We have a project called the 50 State Project. I'll talk about it in a second, where we're parsing state legislatures for every state. We started a month ago with 0 states parsed. And as of this afternoon, the last I heard, at about 1 o'clock, we had 43 states parsed. This is remarkable that people have gone out and parsed state legislative websites, and in a course of 4 to 6 weeks. It's amazing. People are anxious to meet in the physical space, but you don't have to just hold a hackathon, although I strongly encourage you to do so. You could hold just an open government meeting where you get people together to talk about how to change both the federal government, all the branches of government, the executive branch, the legislative branch. I don't want to get into civics class. The executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch. But you know, there's also these state governments, right? That also need change, and they also need opened up. So you can say, hey, you know, we're going to create an open government club in Illinois to make it so that this Blagojevich stuff stops happening. The second thing, this is for the developers in the room, you can parse a state for our 50 State Project. Now, this is why the 50 State Project is important. Our members of Congress do not listen to us, and part of the reason why is because they represent too many people. I'm going to be the guy in D.C. who disappoints everyone right now, which is when you write an email to your congressman, they don't read it. I know, it's shocking. In fact, if you write, I suspect, and I have no evidence to claim it, but I suspect that if you write 10,000 emails to your congressman or get 10,000 people to write emails to their congressman, they still don't read it. Every medium is like this. You know, if you get 10,000 phone calls, well, gosh, a member of Congress doesn't have 10,000 lines, so they just get a busy signal. So there's not an effective way to get representatives to listen. And part of the reason why is because representatives may very well represent too many people. And the problem is that the American citizens they don't know that they have this other form of government called their state legislature, and their state senate. And the reason that they don't is because the data and the information isn't there. So we're getting people to parse states to help raise the profile of state representatives and state laws where information really affects them. Because the laws that your state legislature are passing are far more important than the laws that the federal government is passing. You just don't know about them because you can't get to that data. So the long-term objective for this is the more local, the more listening. Now, if you get somebody to make 100 phone calls to a state rep, they're going to listen because they win by 300 votes. If you get somebody to send an email to a state rep, they're going to listen because no one else emails them. So let's set a fire under these guys. The other problem is that the more local you get, the less technology there is. So state legislative websites don't have the budget of the federal government. State legislatures can't do an effective job of really building lots of technology, and I say we stop waiting on them to do it, and we do it ourselves. So we have this website called Open Congress. You can check it out at opencongress.org that does this for members of Congress. It basically is Better Thomas. Thomas is the version that Congress puts out, and congratulations to Thomas. They just adopted a brand new technology 6 weeks ago called permalinks. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of that. And we basically said, well, this isn't okay, right? We need to set up Open Congress that will allow for people to see all this information, comment on them. I showed it to you earlier. See how votes are breaking down visually, and see blogs that mention particular pieces of legislation, videos that mention pieces of legislation, that kind of thing. And the vision of the 50-state strategy is to create an Open Congress in every state. So every state legislature gets the same technology. Open Congress is completely open source, but how do we get there? I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you, but I know that the first thing that we need is the data. So that's what we're asking developers to do. The third thing you can do is redesign an agency. Federal websites are heinous. They are so ugly. This is for the designers in the room. And a picture is worth 1,000 words. We've been doing this a lot lately, and we found it enormously successful at manipulating the government, changing the way they think about their website. So here's one we did. I know you can't see it too good, but that's the Federal Election Commission at the top, what they did, and then what we did at the bottom. And we basically just said, well, you know what, we're going to create a comp of a federal agency and redesign it, and then send it to the FEC and say, this is what we'd like for your website to look like. And when we did this, it's really interesting. When we did this on Sunlight, we posted it up on sunlightlabs.com, and the number one sort of network source of traffic to the sunlightlabs.com site that day was from the FEC. We got thousands of hits from intranet.fec.gov. Weird, right? And then we got a call from the chairman of the FEC that said, I'd like to meet with you about making a new website. He doesn't have that kind of voice, but it'd be a lot cooler if he did. That's really cool. Well, hey, we opened the door to change inside of a federal agency by just drawing them a picture of where to go. We did the same thing with USA.gov. USA.gov is a really, really interesting site that I'd really love to see upgraded. One of the founders of USA.gov is in the room, and you deserve a lot of praise. USA.gov is put on by the General Services Administration, and it's supposed to be sort of the portal for citizens to the United States government. And this is actually the first one we did because it's also the one with sort of the vaguest of intentions, right? So it's just a portal, and it doesn't have a purpose other than being a collection of other stuff. So we said, well, what would myusa.gov look like? Well, it could do things like take all this information that the government already has about us, and we know that they have, and deliver it to us in a personalized way. Tell me, government, how much of my tax dollars you're spending and on what. Personalized to what I've spent. Tell me where my local polling place is and my post office is. Tell me how much student loans I have left. I don't really like to be reminded of that, but tell me how much student loans I have left, and digitize those Social Security things that I get every quarter that says this is how much money that I've given to Social Security, and tell me that in a digitized way. The government has the capability to do this with some creative thinking and some rules changes, but we want to drive the government into really thinking about how to present this kind of information to people, and drawing them a picture is one of the best ways to do it. The fourth thing that you can do is visualize data. This is going to become really important. The cracks in the dam of data coming out of the government are apparent, and we've reached a critical place where there's going to be a flood of data coming out of the government soon. This guy, Vivek Kundra, is the CIO of the federal government, and the first thing that he wants to do is create Data.gov. What Data.gov is, besides a Google keyword that I bought to redirect to sunlightlabs.com, is what Data.gov is going to be a catalog of all the information, that all the feeds that government puts out and all the databases that government puts out in a single place for developers and for citizens. But this data existing isn't good enough. We need ways, compelling ways, to tell people how this data applies to them. And data visualization is going to become one of the most important ways for citizens to interact with their government. And we need new intermediaries to take this information and present it in compelling ways. This clock, I'll explain it. You can think of this visualization as kind of a clock, where I certainly can't point. My arms aren't that long, but the middle there is basically noon, where the small bar is, and it goes all the way around to 11:59, where it gets really long, and that's the frequency count of the word transparency in the New York Times politics section. So you can see how we're getting interested in from 1990 to 2009. Another site that we did that's really cool, it's called capitalwords.org. I don't have a slide in here for it, but Josh, if you're in the room, Josh Ruley made it. He's a great guy. We came to the conclusion that the congressional record every day was 149,000 words. 149,000 words. So to put that in scope, A Tale of Two Cities is 135,000 words. So if you want to know what's going on in Congress every day, you've got to read A Tale of Two Cities every day, which, by the way, is more than I read in my entire academic career. So what we did is we said, well, what if we did word counts? What if we made sort of a word of the day calendar for what the most popular word of any given day is in the congressional record? What would that look like? And so we did, and we saw something really interesting. In June, the most popular word of the day was energy or oil. Not June of 2008. In June of 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, and 2008, the most popular word of the day was energy or oil. So we thought, wait a minute, we can do trends. This is cool. So now capitalwords.org allows you to plug in a word and draw a graph of its popularity over time, or see who the most talkative lawmakers are in Congress, or what a lawmaker's favorite words are. I feel really sorry for Jeff Flake, congressman in Arizona. There are all kinds of interesting visualizations, interesting data that you can get out of this. For instance, if you plug in the word marriage into Capital Words, you see that marriage has two spikes in September of 2004, September of 2006, and September of 2008. That's the gay marriage debate. And they don't talk about marriage any other time than the month before an election. Interesting, right? So you can get the idea for the kinds of things you can do in visualization. Here's another great one. So this is a Google Motion chart, and I couldn't figure out how to put it into PowerPoint. But on that red dot on the left-hand side, that's the number of contributions, the dollar amount of contributions given in the political process. The higher that dot is, the more they give to Republicans. The further to the right is, the more they give to Democrats. And that dot goes from, we give a lot of money to Republicans in 2004, to we give a little bit of money to both in 2006, to we give a lot of money to Democrats in 2008. Shocking that the banking industry would start giving money to the party in power. You think they were hedging something? So these visualizations can tell really dramatic stories to the American people that really help people make sense of this data and information. And we need people to take data that Sunlight Labs is putting out and the Sunlight Labs community is putting out and really transform them into things that people can realize. The fifth thing that you can do is +1 our community. We have an email list. This is mainly targeted, again, for developers and designers. A highly technical email list of open source developers at our disposal. It's at sunlightlabs@googlegroups.com. And you can join it and contribute. It's a really interesting place to be. 2 weeks ago, we had a guy who's a chief of staff of the mayor of Tucson, and he said, I don't know much about technology, but I do know that we need a way to fix potholes. So does anybody here know of any software that could help us fix potholes, help people take pictures of potholes and post them online so the city government can fix them? This generated a 30-chain discussion of all kinds of different solutions and volunteer efforts to fix the city of Tucson. Really cool stuff is starting to happen. We also have a wiki at wiki.sunlightlabs.com where we put our project ideas. Our 50-state project is hosted there, and some of the big problems that we have to solve. One of the bigger ones is this idea of name standardization. The federal government, for instance, refers to Walmart about 1,000 different ways. So it's Wall Star Mart, Wall Space Mart, Wall Star Mart Stores, Inc., stuff like that. WLMRT. Federal government has a contempt for vowels. I'm not sure why. But how do we sort of normalize that information so we can start plugging in Walmart's effectiveness across multiple data sources and recognize those entities? Those are the things that we sort of struggle with. Or how do we develop a generic suite that makes it easier for developers to extract tools out of, say, state legislative websites? And the other thing you can do is steal this presentation and give it. I'm serious. We have an Ignite version of this presentation, which is 5 minutes long, and 15 seconds to slide that you can go and give. And I'll put this full presentation online at sunlightlabs.com either this afternoon or tomorrow or at some point soon, I promise. But take the presentation and give it and create other members of the community to join this movement and get started on actually doing the hard work of tearing down the walls of our government and making government more accountable and transparent. So that's really all I've got to talk about. You can follow me on Twitter. All I do is really talk about the government on Twitter, either that or bitch about the local subway system in Washington, D.C., but I promise to keep that at a minimum. And I thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate really everybody showing up here to hear more about what we're doing at Sunlight Labs, and I hope that together we really can meet our legislators and members of Congress halfway and fix our government and change the way that the federal government works. So I'll open the floor for questions. The rest of the time is yours. Please go up to the microphone to ask me a question I've been instructed to ask.
I should start by saying that I'm not a developer. I'm on the other side of the table in local government, and I'm also a community activist. I love your presentation, but you're really talking to developers. And somehow in my brain, I'm thinking, well, maybe we have two silos going on. You guys are going to be doing all this cool stuff, and us guy on the other side, we will not know. So is there any way, any kind of forum for the two to come together?
Sure, join the Sunlight Labs list.
Okay.
I mean,
will I understand what's going on this discussion? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's an open forum, right? Some stuff you won't, some stuff you will, but some stuff I don't understand. So
Cool.
And by the way, that organizer bit, that's for people that aren't developers too. So get off your butt and go get some people in your local communities together to talk about transparency.
Hi. My name is Chung Le with Gov2Expo software. In your presentation, you show a huge warehouse with who knows what in there. Mm-hmm. And I was told that the government want to have a paper trail of everything that they say or they did.
That's right.
And in the open technology environment, we want to have everything on the website. So how do you solve the problem of providing online access at the same time trying to get rid of those huge warehouse, full of paper?
With a big scanner. I mean, seriously, a lot of the stuff that we deal with really is, that's a Hadoop sort of part where I was talking about earlier. So there's lots of this data that's not in accessible formats. My favorite one to whine about is the Foreign Agent Registration Act database. This one makes me apoplectic. The Foreign Agent Registration Act database is a database of meetings between our members of Congress and foreign lobbyists. It is a database of filings that are completely handwritten and scanned and put in, so there's no way to digitize them. They have no metadata attached to them. And so basically what we're doing now, we're trying to digitize it by, we sent a FOIA request to the Department of Justice, who hosts it. And some of them, don't get me wrong, some of them are typed, but a lot of them are handwritten or scratched out or all kinds of crazy stuff. We sent a FOIA request to get the hard drive with all the image files on them, which we finally got after like a year. And we're having people manually key this stuff in. It's hard work. And one of the things that we're interested in building are tools that allow volunteers to, sort of see this form and help digitize it and, get points and maybe get a hoodie or something like that. But, we're thinking, the interesting thing, to answer your question, the interesting thing is data and technology will get us about 80% of the way there, but we're going to need people to actually, verify the other 20% and really take a look at it. And that's the other part of we have to get not only really good at building, very intelligent technology, but also really good at user interfaces that help people, make sense of this data.
First of all, I really want to applaud you for your efforts.
Thanks.
I also am from the other side of the fence. I work for local government, and this is one of the things that we battle all the time. One of the things that I see as an issue here is you're looking at the stuff that's already out there and how to make it more accessible. And from my position, I'm trying to figure out, okay, so I have this data set to make public. What's the format you want?
Right.
How do I make you aware of it? So, I'd like to have, there's a slew of, maybe nothing expensive, but I have a slew of different options. And so which of those are going to be better? I know scanning things into PDFs ain't going to work.
Right. So
but then, the next question is, well, does it need to be
an XML or does it need to be?
Yeah, XML or an RSS feed or SQL tables or, what the heck are you looking for?
So I got two things to say to that. One is you'd be amazed, and this is for the general audience, you'd be amazed at when we talk, and when we talk to the federal government especially, how many people inside of governments go, thank God, you have liberated us from our oppressors. And we really want to help you, and how helpful actually the people inside of government are on this. When I first started at Sunlight about 9 months ago, I was like, gosh, all federal employees are terrible people, and we have to. But it turns out that they're really fighting this battle on the inside too, and that's what makes it really exciting. To give you an answer specifically on your question, we really tell government that you need to present data in three ways in order for us to consider it complete. The first one is we want bulk access to the data in its most granular form. So that's probably like the scanned filing if it's a piece of paper, right, in some kind of HTTP directory so that we can download all of it. We want all of it so that we can do whatever we want with it. This guy who's local, Carl Malamud, is a big proponent of that too. He runs a website called public.resource.org. He does great things like go to the GPO who sells the Federal Register for $14,000 a year in XML. He'll go and raise money to buy a license for that and then put it on his FTP server and then write the GPO and say, sue me, I dare you. It's really cool stuff. And so the first is bulk access. The second thing that we want is then an API on top of that data that helps us look it up and manipulate it better. And that API should probably be RESTful. It should be REST-based and output in JSON and XML. And then the third thing we want is a compelling user interface for ordinary citizens to talk about it. But the important thing is to do it in this order, right? It isn't to start with a great user interface and then add an API as an afterthought and then put the bulk access out there when people complain enough. It's to do it in the right order, which is 1, bulk access, 2, API, 3, compelling user experience, because the New York Times is always going to have more traffic than whitehouse.gov on most days. So make it so that the media outlets and the private sector can get to the data to put that data in front of as many eyeballs as possible. So is that a good answer to your question? Awesome.
Yeah, I'm just curious. You've been in the mouth of the dragon for what, 4 months, 5 months?
I can't. Can you speak up?
You've been in the mouth of the dragon for what, 4 months?
Yeah, sure. I've been at Sunlight for 9 months, and
Right. Have you explored the limitations of transparency when you're dealing with money and information black holes like the CIA, DoD, Federal Reserve?
I don't think we're after any CIA databases right now. The fruit is so low that we're not really after hacking the FBI. I have often said that we know Sunlight will know when it's becoming very successful, when the EFF starts complaining about the stuff that we do. But right now we're allies, and we imagine that we'll be allies with the EFF and sort of the privacy sector for a long time.
What is EFF?
The Electronic Frontier Foundation.
Right.
They do online privacy and stuff like that, or the ACLU for that matter. But there's definitely some limits that we tend not to cross. But the point is, let's deal with those problems as we come across them, right? So, we know not to put people's social security numbers online, right? And that's generally accepted. We know not to put people's credit card numbers online, stuff like that. But there's a rule, which is start with transparency and then start redacting. Don't start redacting and then put out what's left. So that's our general thought.
I'm sorry, what did you say before that?
So start with the open data.
Yeah.
Right, and then take the information out that could be private.
Okay.
Rather than take all the information out and put out what you would like the public to see.
I see. But I guess there's some day coming where you're going to have to DOD has such huge budgets and waste and
Sure. I mean, budget transparency is something we're really interested in doing.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of
Salona Bonewald is in the room, I think, probably who is really into you can find information about her at Salona.com, but she's really into sort of federal budget transparency and does a lot of stuff.
And I'm just curious, is there a way to know how much of these budgets are black?
I don't know. I mean, our main focus at the Sunlight Foundation is about money, influence, and politics. And
Right. Yeah. I'm just this is something for the future.
Yeah. Oh, we got our eye on it.
Okay.
Bob Glushko, UC Berkeley. I'd like to make a proposal. We have a project we started about 2 months ago across the Bay to look at the data feeds that people are going to be mandated to put out as part of the Recovery.gov stuff, and we've been trying to work on improving the specifications so that they can be more computable. We've written a tech report, and there's a demonstration site up, and we'll put something out on your website about this so people can come look at the data we've done and maybe get involved with us to hack some of this stuff. We're basically trying to hack all the feeds, aggregate the feeds, and really improve the government's specs to make the feeds more useful to everybody.
Do you have a website?
Yeah.
What is it?
I'll post it for him. I mean, it's the School of Information at UC Berkeley. The key person's name is Wilde and Kansa. Wilde and Kansa, the two key guys on this project. All right?
I want to take a second to respond to that and say how important it is for everyone to realize that Sunlight Labs is a convener, but we are not the only game in town. And there are tons of projects out there, and our job is to create and inspire tons of projects and to make it so that everybody is working on their niche. And Bob has found, this Recovery.gov thing is really, really, really important, so let's do that. And I want to commend you guys at Berkeley for doing it. And I think Sunlight Labs and the Sunlight Foundation is a great place to find out about these projects happening.
I disagree with one thing you said, which was put all the information out there and then start redacting. Like, you don't put down, here are all the people who work for the CIA and then start blacking out some names.
Again, we're not really...
Right.
We're not.
And the thing is that actually the military has been doing a lot of transparent sort of stuff. I don't know if you heard of the stealth bomber, and that's goes through the air and it's invisible. In fact, you look up in the sky, you only see the pilot flying through the air. But okay, just joke.
First of all, I want to say what a great job you guys did with the hackathon this weekend. It was one of the big reasons I came down here, and it was even more fun than I ever expected. and I met a lot of great people. And I want to ask, one of the flip side of the coin when it comes to the government data is that some government data isn't discoverable, but the other side is that there's a lot of data that's out there that is just in unparsable or difficult to read formats. And how do you balance, given limited time and limited resources, the efforts of just getting that data that's out there in one central place versus building tools to let people look at it? Because there's varying levels you can actually give access to that data in.
I think that's what Sunlight Labs is really all about, right? We came to the conclusion, we've only been sort of this open development group for about 6 months. Probably less than that. We started in January. We basically came to the conclusion there's no way that we can do everything, right?
Exactly.
It just ain't going to happen. So that's why I'm here. That's why I'm like, look, we've all got to get together and do a lot of this different stuff, right? And so it's really a question of initiative and leadership. And my job is quickly changing from that of being CTO, right, or technology director to inspirer, right, and like getting people involved in this community to take initiative to tackle some of the problems that you spoke of. Mm-hmm. In terms of how do we balance between the offline stuff and the online stuff, and internally at the Sunlight Foundation, we have a focus of money, power, and influence, and that's really the stuff that we are interested in. Now, Sunlight Labs and the Sunlight Labs community has a much broader focus, which is how do we tear down the walls of this government and make it more open and accessible to people. And it's really about combining both of those things and then providing the coaching and leadership to developers so that they understand, the constraints of the law, so that they, look at the FEC database and go, hey, this column, this donation column has a $1.3 million contribution in it, and $1.3 million contributions are illegal, so, maybe I should fix that. That's the kind of stuff that that's the stuff that we're looking at providing. Am I doing a good job? I feel like I'm not doing a good job.
I guess kind of what I was asking is, do you have a vision of creating these one-off kind of, we have one database for congressional votes, we have another database for FEC data, or there's another vision where you just have one big database of tons of raw data in one place, kind of like YouTube, very disjointed.
We're taking a little upstream from that, right? Like the 50-state project, right?
Yeah.
What we said was not, let's set up 50 open congresses.
Sure.
Right? What we said was, let's develop parsers for all 50 states. And the reason why we did that is because we think that if we make those parsers that data more accessible, people will do really interesting things besides open Congress with it, right? Mm-hmm. And so we take it sort of a step further and say, let's develop tools, let's develop data sets that make it so that developers and designers and visual architects can do this stuff. And then sometimes, if stuff is in the sort of Sunlight Foundation sweet spot, we'll go and tackle it too.
You provide the data and let them
right.
build the tools. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep.
I'd like to take this opportunity to raise for this audience this concept, which is pretty astounding when you think about it. About 98% of the votes in the United States are counted by proprietary software owned by about 4 corporations. Their contracts with your state election administrators actually say that the electronic data of the votes is their proprietary right. And that is not disclosed, and it makes it practically impossible for citizens to independently verify the outcome of an election. Basically, what goes into the box comes out of the box, and you have to trust what happened inside the box. I just want to raise that idea. Now, and this is primarily a legal problem, until we can get it recognized that the public record of the vote should be a public record and open to instant verification by independent means. We're stuck with after-the-fact checking the votes, and I was very interested to hear this idea of parsing data because there's about 30,000 counties across the United States, and there's about as many different ways of recording and producing the actual vote. Some progressive areas are putting it up in a malleable data format on the web, but many places it's in static PDFs. There is basically no way for the citizens to effectively analyze and check the results of an election. So this is something that the movement, the election integrity movement, could really benefit from partnering with people in the Sunlight Labs, is to learn some techniques for parsing that data.
That's true.
Thanks.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for doing this and for really putting it together. My name is Bruce Wolf. I served 4 years here at the San Francisco Sunshine Ordinance Task Force. And
cool.
I know what transparency means and how important it is, considering the hundreds, if not thousands, of people that bring complaints every month and are not enforced. And so I just want to make a statement by saying I want to encourage people to become gadflies, because that's really what it takes. So you really got to be there. You got to be very consistent. You got to hammer your elected officials and your hired agency bureaucrats to really kind of move the information forward and to let them know that you want it. And if you have a sunshine ordinance, or you live in California and you have the Public Records Act, you want to make those, or use a FOA, make them all the time, because eventually they're going to say, I'm tired of filling out these forms or faxing them out or sending them. Is there any way I could get this up online so that people can just get it any way they want and stop bothering me? And that really is what I find helps a lot, and then gets the IT guys in the cities going.
I agree with that. One thing that we're a non-developer, someone who just wants to do something, adopt your congressman. I mean, think about there's tons of data out there about a member of Congress. Figure out what that data is. You can go to our sites like Open Congress, watchdog.net, stuff like that. Even Thomas, their personal websites where they're posting their earmark requests and stuff like that. And keep an eye on them. Figure out who your congressman is and adopt them, and you be their watchdog. And get other people to be their watchdog too. And that doesn't mean have an adversarial relationship with them. It just means keep your eyes on the data that they're putting out. And do the same thing for your state rep. I mean, how many people here know who their state rep is? Raise your hand. All right, not bad. About 50%. For those of you who don't, I encourage you today to figure out who your state rep is, and keep an eye on them. Figure out how to keep an eye on them. Figure out what bills they're sponsoring or co-sponsoring. And the same for your member of Congress. Keep an eye on them. So anyway.
Hi, thank you for Sunlight Foundation. So I think we're privileged here in the United States in a lot of ways, in ways that we take for granted. The more I look into it, the more I realize that's true. But on the other hand, it strikes me at this moment, as Sunlight is emerging and as there's a new administration and we are sort of drowning in technical capacities that we've never had before, the information machines that we all have in our laps here. Things are changing really quickly. However, there's a challenge that I didn't hear really addressed so far, and I'd like to bring it up. Now, in the United States, we're unique in that we have a nonprofit sector. The nonprofit sector runs on goodwill, on volunteerism, on largesse.
And sometimes government grants.
And sometimes government grants. But it can't there's a lot of things that it can't do, and we shouldn't expect it to do. I'm a fan of entrepreneurial efforts and of the private sector, and especially small business and appropriate scale business. I think we need markets to do some of this work. And I think that it is, we could suffer from wishful thinking if we're expecting that a cheerful call for volunteers will carry the kind of real deep work that needs to be done. So, I think looking at models, I think all the people in this room particularly, have to learn really quickly from law firms, from research institutions, from others that are knowledge workers, that have business models that work now and that we can apply quickly to this emerging moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, Habitat for Humanity isn't the only housing company in the United States, right? So it takes both. People go out and I'm going to, hang up drywall for a week next week in Louisiana. But there's also commercial efforts down there trying to rebuild houses. But you're right, and that's what I was talking about with the transparency creates markets aspect of things. There's all of this data that's about to flow out of government or is flowing out of government, and people can make money off of it. In fact, people do make money off of it. A lot of the stuff on the judicial side of things, right? Those books that are behind lawyers in Law and Order, you know what I'm talking about? All those books in your lawyer's office? That's government data. That's the law. But companies charge for that information, and lawyers buy those books. And there's information in there, and that's, you know, I want to say another thing. We are very fortunate to live in probably one of the most transparent democracies in the world. India, I think this is true. I think India's laws are copyrighted, and so you actually have to get permission from the government to republish the law. So, how do you obey the law when you've got to pay to get it? Anyway, so I don't have my sort of international stuff down. I'm really focused on how we change America with this stuff. But I agree that there needs to be a lot of commercial stuff too.
Van Jones just got promoted to the White House to handle, basically, I think it'd be fair to call it the blue collar side of things. Mm-hmm. But I think that in the current context, that we need to think really carefully, the people here in this room, about how we can create markets that will work for people here, and that can create. We just need that. Let's just say that we need that.
Cool. How are we doing on time? Does anybody know? Oh, great. Cool. I didn't think I'd fill it up. Thanks, everybody.